This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Chinese President Xi Jinping calls for world unity in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. At least 3 people killed as security forces break up a protest in Sudan. And Mali vows to appeal against sanctions imposed by ECOWAS. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details of those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Hannah Viviers with the day's business headlines. Hannah.
Thank you so much for that, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. The Southern African region is set for an economic rebound this year after the COVID-induced downturn in 2020 and 2021. And Tanzania and Burundi sign an agreement to construct a $900 million railway line link that will link the two countries. And that's what's coming up in business later on Africa Live. Back to you, Beatrice.
Hannah, thank you. The World Economic Forum is holding the 2022 Davos agenda. The online event is held with the participation of global leaders under the theme of State of the World. They will discuss some of the world's most pressing challenges during the week-long event. Chinese President Xi Jinping addressed the meeting on Monday, calling for unity in the face of the pandemic.
Thanks to the concerted efforts of the international community, major progress has been made in the global fight against the pandemic. That said, the pandemic is proving a protracted one, resurging with more variants and spreading faster than before. It poses a serious threat to people's safety and health and exerts a profound impact on the global economy. Strong confidence and cooperation represent the only right way to defeat the pandemic.
President Xi Jinping also called on the world to move forward by following the logic of historical progress and riding the tide of development. He said the world is developing through the movement of contradictions, and the history of humanity is a history of achieving growth by meeting tests and overcoming crises. President Xi Jinping also said economic globalization is a trend of our times and countries should stick to true multilateralism.
Countries around the world should uphold true multilateralism. We should remove barriers, not erect walls. We should open up, not close off. We should seek integration, not decoupling. This is the way to build an open world economy. We should guide reforms of the global governance system with the principle of fairness and justice, and uphold the multilateral trading system with the World Trade Organization at its center. We should make generally acceptable and effective rules for artificial intelligence and digital economy on the basis of full consultation, and create an open, just, and non-discriminatory environment for scientific and technological innovation. This is the way to make economic globalization more open, inclusive, balanced, and beneficial for all, and to fully unleash the vitality of the world economy.
President Xi Jinping has said there is a need for further opening up of the world economy as well as greater cooperation. President Xi noted that the world needs to explore new drivers of economic growth to promote a steady and robust global economic recovery. It is a view echoed by a section of economists who say Africa would benefit from responsible economic policies. Global chairman of the Fairfax Africa Fund, Zimedine Negatu, gave us his insights on the impact of the opening up of the global economy as championed by President Xi.
I think that President Xi Jinping's thinking is we need to re-engage more effectively because globalization has benefited millions, if not billions, of people around the world. I think Africa is on the cusp of transforming from a commodity-dependent economy, hopefully in the next decade or so, to a value-added. And for Africa to benefit from that transformation, it will need an open global trading system that doesn't favor one side or the other, but plays by the rule of the game that was set up in the last decade or so. So his message, I think, resonates with many in the developed world. I think the $40 billion commitment made at FOCAC a month ago, that's excellent initiative. I would urge the US and Europe to follow up on that. I think the 40 billion of investments and financing over the next 3 years, because what Africa needs actually more than aid right now is FDI and financial support to accelerate the growth, the transformation of Africa. Okay, those kinds of initiatives, I think, will help. The key point here is we're in it together.
In his speech, President Xi pointed out that economic globalization is the trend of the times. Donga Kamelu, a Zambian economist, has commended President Xi for putting forward many important initiatives, saying they are beneficial to world economic and trade development. Meanwhile, the chairman of the Nigerian Investment Promotion Council, Babangida Nguroje, believes that economic globalization will not only benefit African countries, but that it will also make global development more productive. Nuroji has expressed his support for China's efforts in promoting opening up and advocating economic globalization.
And I must mention that the president did speak about a number of important issues in his speech, and the aspect of globalization coming out very clearly is extremely important. And I must also go ahead and mention that in the last 5 years, beyond just the speech, there has been action. There have been steps towards achieving globalization or contributing towards globalization by China. For example, the expo, the trade expo, the import and export expo is a very, very good example of some of the strides that China is taking to promote globalization.
And China has been immensely contributing to the economy of Africa and other countries, even during the pandemic, by providing the vaccines and other things. So I think we have to commend China, and so far the economy is growing. Because of the quality leadership China is providing, you see its knee on impacting positively to humanity. And it's one of the contributing factors too. That is why China is doing very well. I am in support of this globalization policy of the Chinese, because that will bring development, especially to our African continent and other continents. And with the way China are going, I think it's commendable, and they are doing very well. And it's left for us, other African continent and other countries, to make sure that mutually they cooperate with China in order to have that mutual benefits in terms of investment or globalization, so that our economy will be more productive.
China's gross domestic product expanded over 8% year-on-year in 2021, reaching nearly $18 trillion. The economic growth is faster than the government's projected target of 6%. Shushu has more.
Head of the National Bureau of Statistics, Nin Jizhe, has just introduced the country's national economic figures for us in 2021. He says that the country's gross domestic product, or GDP, exceeded 110 trillion yuan threshold, or around $17 trillion last year, expanding 8.1% year-on-year. And also in the fourth quarter of 2021, the country's GDP also up 4% year-on-year. And Nin Jizhe says that the country's overall major social and economic development have all achieved fruitful results. So by industries, the value added of the country's primary industry up 7.1%, and that of the secondary and tertiary industries both up 8.2%. And the country's job market has also remained stable last year. The surveyed unemployment rate in China's urban areas stood at 5.1%. That's a 0.5 percentage points lower than the average of the previous year. And also 30 million new jobs were created in China's urban areas last year, 1 million more than the previous year. Although all these data have met expectations, Lin Zizhi just reminded that there are still uncertainties amid the changing pandemic situations and also the external economic situation. And he says that the country will take further measures to consolidate its economic growth this year.
Well, let's now take a look at stories making the headlines across the continent. In Sudan, where security forces there have opened fire on protesters, killing at least 3 people and wounding several on Monday. This has brought the total death toll from the protests to at least 67 people. The fatalities will likely further complicate UN efforts to find a way out of the ongoing crisis. The United Nations and Western governments have widely condemned the crackdown on protesters. Thousands have taken to the streets in Khartoum and elsewhere in the country to denounce an October military takeover. Well, Naba Muhyiddin has the latest from Khartoum. Naba, reports of 3 people being killed during the protest. What do you know? What's the latest?
Thanks, Beatrice. On ground, there is at least 7 are confirmed to be killed due to doctors' committee, and I saw some of the killed people and injured people in one of Khartoum's hospitals. There is over 129 injured people with different casualties, live ammunition, and some of them with tear gas and sound bombs. Also, there is gatherings and crowds around Khartoum hospitals, and people cannot go there, but because the protesters are blocking the streets in order to protect the surroundings of the hospitals. Despite that, the security forces have fired tear gas around the hospitals to ban people from going and gathering around hospitals and the protesters to get medical care. Also on the latest, the FFC, which is Freedom and Change Forces, the opposition alliance has just announced 2 days civil disobedience against the military authorities, reacting to the excessive use of violence and the killing of the protesters without any reason of using it. They announced 2 days of civil disobedience, and also resistance committee, which is the groups that are organizing the protest, right now are closing all of the streets of the capital with barricades, condemning the killing of the protesters and the violence of the security forces.
Right, Naba, you know, the death toll at around 67, that's quite a high number of people killed just days after a top police commander was killed on Friday. Why are we seeing more violence during these protests?
Actually, there is no reason for this violence to take place. As we see and know, there is more than 67 protesters are killed and casualties are hundreds of people are injured. So violence will not lead for anything if there is any if there is any way for a political resolution or a solution for this political crisis. Violence will lead for an endless circle of chaos, like the resigned prime minister has already warned of. So this violence is we cannot justify it. And whenever there is any kind of hope for a political resolution or for this crisis, there is violence, as we saw on November 17th, where 11 protesters are killed, and today 7 protesters are killed, and in Omdurman on December 30, where 5 protesters were killed. So right. Violence will not lead for anything. It will lead for escalation, and yes, and it will lead for more deadlock, and maybe it will lead for chaos.
Well, earlier though, Sudan's military chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan chaired an emergency session of the Security and Defense Council. What were the outcomes of that meeting?
There is a lot of decisions came out of this meeting. One of it is to form a unit for defeating the terrorism without defining what terrorism right now is threatening the country, but there is a special unit will be formed for defeating the terrorism. And also one of the decisions is to reopen the borders with South Sudan, with the neighboring South Sudan country. And also there is some decisions and the council directed the rebel groups to take their troops and militaries out of the capital and out of residential areas, specifically out of Khartoum, because it was one of Juba peace talks outcomes that rebel groups came with their troops in the capital. So right now there's a decision for them to be out and gather out till security procedures are done, until they classify them. And one of the decisions also is to verify the emergency of law, the law of emergency during the upcoming protest. So there is 5 or 6 decisions, but the major are 4 regarding the rebel groups and the protest, and also reopening of the borders with South Sudan.
Naba Mohidin joining us there from Khartoum. Thank you. Well, let's now go to West Africa, where Mali has said it will seek to overturn sanctions imposed by the West African Economic Bloc ECOWAS in an international court. In an interview broadcast over the weekend, Mali's interim Prime Minister Choguel Kokala Maiga described the sanctions as illegal. The government is formulating a strategy that will see the country challenge the embargoes in an international court. Leaders from the ECOWAS agreed to sanction Mali earlier this month over the Mali junta to stay in power and their delays to elections. The measures include a freeze of assets, a trade embargo, and the closing of borders. The US, the European Union, and France have backed the decision. Several airlines and even the United Nations have since suspended flights to Bamako. Mali is already beginning to feel the effects of the sanctions.
ECOWAS could have simply frozen the assets of the members of the National Transitional Council, but extending sanctions to the state of Mali means the ECOWAS wants to prevent the payment of Malian civil servants. When we prevent the payment of civil servants, it is as if it is the people as a whole that we have decided to sanction. Yet ECOWAS says the sanctions are not meant to hit the people of Mali, but rather its authorities. Freezing Mali's assets also means punishing private companies, because the banks will not be able to meet the needs of these companies.
Mali is under embargo, and that's not good for us. We have a huge problem getting people into the sub-region. The Ivorians, Senegalese, and several other nationals from the sub-region were stuck here. They can't go home because the borders are closed. You see, the ECOWAS sanctions have not only a negative impact on the Malian people, but also on the populations of the sub-region.
Algerian Foreign Minister Ramtane Lamamra and UN Libya envoy Stephanie Williams have visited Egypt and held talks in Cairo with the country's foreign minister and the Secretary General of the Arab League about developments in Libya. Cairo is concerned about the delay in holding Libya's elections. It is trying to coordinate efforts with international powers to help the North African nation pick its new government through the polls. Here is CGTN's Adel Mahroui with more.
Cairo hosted a series of diplomatic meetings on Libya on Sunday. Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry welcomed his Algerian counterpart Ramtane Lamamra. They both stressed the need to end any foreign intervention in Libya and the evacuation of all foreign troops and mercenaries.
Egypt and Algeria are setting their agenda and what they have envisioned in the future for Libya in terms of the elections and security, as well as the future of trade. It is extremely significant for Egypt and Algeria. First, because of the shared borders, shared resources in the Mediterranean, and both countries have a great interest in having a unified Libya.
Following the meeting between the two foreign ministers, Lamamra continued talks about Libya with the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Aboulghait. Algeria will be hosting the Arab Summit later this year. Libya is going to top the Arab conflicts that will be listed in the regional leaders' agenda.
Today's role of the Arab League is to observe, initiate, and supervise the political transition in Libya in order to have a unified one. And of course, that's on the top agenda of the Arab League, to have a stable, truly representative government in Libya.
In two separate meetings, the Algerian top diplomat and the Arab League Secretary General met the UN Special Envoy to Libya, Stephanie Williams. They talked about the latest developments and reached a consensus on the importance of holding the elections as soon as possible. The Arab League renewed its endorsement to the 3 UN-led tracks of negotiations that focus on political, economic and military solutions for Libya. Egypt is William's third international stop after Tunisia and Turkey in an international tour that is focusing on the influential players in Libya. Her next stop is Moscow, where she will continue to push for holding Libya's elections by June 2022. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. British police detained 2 teenagers in connection with a Texas synagogue hostage drama.
No one again began holding guns.
Machine guns from police forces toward the protesters.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
It's over a week since schools reopened in Uganda after being closed for almost 2 years. But some parents and guardians are struggling to find school fees for their children. The long school closures has disrupted learning for 15 million school children, with about 30% of them not expected to return to class. Isabel Nakiria reports.
Rose Nanseroko's children are stuck at home. She's not been able to send them back to school. Rose used to operate her business close to the capital, Kampala, but had to shut it down due to curfew restrictions.
When my stationery business collapsed, I opened this bar, but security officers couldn't allow me to operate beyond curfew hours. I was arrested several times.
Rose is now stranded with 4 of her children. She's only managed to send back 1 child to school who will be sitting for his final year level 7 exams later this year.
I never went to school, but I want my children to be educated. In fact, I always ask them to read for me something that I don't understand, and that excites me. So I really want my children to study, but I'm defeated.
Ugandan schools reopened for learning after over 80 weeks of closure. But not all pupils have returned. A number of children in this slum neighborhood have not reported to class over a week since school reopened. And in almost all cases, their parents were hit hard by the pandemic and are unable to pay their fees. Rose's children are 2 years behind the learning program because they didn't study online during the school's closure. Public schools in Uganda are less costly than private ones. But not many can afford paying the $30 fee required in those public learning institutions. And head teachers say some parents are reluctant to take their children back to school for fear of another lockdown.
Some have genuinely had financial constraints, but others fear. They think we may pay fully and then they close.
A new UNESCO report shows Uganda may fall short of ensuring equitable education for all by 2030. The National Planning Authority estimates 30% of learners may not return to class due to early pregnancy and marriages and child labor. And many parents like Rose are struggling to send their children back to school due to financial challenges. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Investigation into a hostage-taking incident at a Texas synagogue has spilled over into England. Police in the city of Greater Manchester say 2 teenagers have been detained after the incident on Saturday. The FBI has identified the man who held 4 people hostage in the synagogue in Colleyville as Malik Faisal Akram. The British national was killed in a firefight with law enforcement after a standoff lasting nearly 11 hours. Tony Waterman has more from Austin, Texas.
New details are emerging about this hostage taker who held 4 Jewish worshippers captive on Saturday. The FBI's evidence response team is still processing evidence at the synagogue while its joint terrorism task force is following up on leads, and that is likely to now stretch across the Atlantic. According to multiple reports, the UK Foreign Office has already been in touch with local authorities here in Texas. At this point, investigators have not yet confirmed a motive, but it has been widely reported that this gunman was demanding the release of Afifa Siddiqui, a Pakistani neuroscientist who is currently serving an 86-year sentence in Texas for trying to kill American soldiers while in detention in Afghanistan. According to officials, the suspect entered Beth Israel Synagogue during Saturday's services, which were being live streamed on Facebook. And after a near 11-hour standoff, an elite FBI hostage rescue team stormed the building. The suspect was killed and 3 hostages rescued. The 4th had been released just hours earlier. Now, the rabbi of that congregation, Charlie Citron Walker, on Sunday broke his silence in an emotional Facebook post saying, "I am grateful that we made it out. I am grateful to be alive." This situation, while absolutely harrowing, having the best possible outcome for these individuals. None of the hostages needed medical attention, and they've all been reunited with their families. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Austin, Texas.
New Zealand and Australia have flown planes over Tonga to help assess the devastation from Saturday's volcanic eruption and tsunami. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says there's significant damage, but the full extent is still unclear. Owen Poland reports.
There are still no official reports of any casualties, although some people have been reported missing, including a British woman who ran an animal rescue centre in the capital of Nuku'alofa. She was apparently swept away by Saturday's tsunami while she was trying to save some dogs from drowning. Locals have described Nuku'alofa as looking like a moonscape after it was covered in a thick layer of volcanic ash that has contaminated water supplies and ruined crops. Power is now being restored in the capital, but the biggest problem is the lack of telephone and internet contact, which has been caused by a break in Tonga's undersea communications cable. That could take up to 2 weeks to repair because the specialist equipment needed is based currently in Papua New Guinea. We're still waiting to get reports back from 2 Air Force reconnaissance aircraft that have flown to Tonga from New Zealand and Australia, who are combining their efforts on this response. Their main mission is to make an aerial assessment of the damage on the outer islands, which have been cut off by a lack of power and communication. Military aircraft from New Zealand and Australia are also standing by to take humanitarian aid to Tonga, including much needed drinking water and desalination equipment.
U.S. companies are choosing their own COVID policies after the Supreme Court blocked President Joe Biden's vaccine mandate as the pandemic disrupts supply chains. Infections remain high, especially in nursing homes. Caroline Malone reports from Washington, D.C.
We are among the most vulnerable people, and now residents in nursing homes are having to contend with another increase in COVID cases. Well, that has led to 645 related deaths among residents in the first full week of January, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. That's an increase of 47% from the week before. Well, the situation is in no way as bad as it was in nursing homes earlier in the pandemic, largely due to vaccines. But some nursing homes are reinstating strict measures such as limiting visitors, masks, social distancing, and need of proof of negative tests to protect those residents. There's also added protection with the US Supreme Court decision to uphold the Biden administration's vaccine mandate for healthcare workers in government-funded facilities. Well, other businesses, however, are deciding on their own policies. Since the Supreme Court blocked another ruling that private companies with more than 100 workers have to require employees be vaccinated or tested, Well, some big US companies, such as Citigroup, have already made sure 99% of employees are vaccinated, and they're keeping vaccine mandates in place, while others, like General Electric, suspended their COVID-19 vaccine requirements, even though many workers are vaccinated already. Well, smaller businesses are really feeling the weight of the continued pandemic. The surge of Omicron cases means more workers are out sick, and so they have staffing shortages. There are fewer in-person customers, and there are continued supply chain issues which are delaying products getting onto the shelves. Well, people in the US should get some relief, though, paying for COVID-19 tests. With a new order from the Biden administration, people can get home COVID tests at no cost through insurance, and from Wednesday they'll be able to order free home tests online. But with heavy snowfall and ice storms due to hit large parts of the country, though, travel could become more difficult, including for deliveries of essential goods. Caroline Malone, CGTN, Washington.
Britain's COVID-19 self-isolation law may be scrapped as soon as spring. Prime Minister Boris Johnson reportedly seeks to end emergency COVID laws as cases fall, but plans to keep official guidelines in place. The move will not punish or fine those who do not self-isolate after catching COVID-19. While France will now require people eating out, visiting cultural sites, or traveling on long-distance transport to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. The country has done away with exceptions for those who have tested negative for the virus. Nearly 78% of those eligible have had the vaccine, which now includes children over 5 years old. But that has not stopped an intense debate over how to implement and enforce the new requirement. Ryan Thompson reports from Paris.
Nearly 2 weeks of back and forth between France's two houses of parliament over how to legalize a vaccination requirement for most public places has finally been resolved. The National Assembly voted Sunday to do away with the existing health pass system, which allowed you to present a negative test result, and replace it with a firm requirement to be vaccinated against COVID-19. The new rules will affect restaurants, entertainment, and long-distance transport as soon as Thursday, according to the government. That's 5 days later than what was originally planned, because many lawmakers couldn't agree on whether new rules should apply to younger people and those in the process of getting jabbed, or which essential services should remain accessible to the unvaccinated. In the end, children under 16 years old can still follow the existing health pass rules. Children even younger, from 5 to 11, have only been eligible to get the jab since mid-December. Hospitals, doctors' offices, and care homes will remain open to the unvaccinated, who can present a negative test result. Saturday saw a return of protesters opposed to the law in different cities across France. But the turnout was much lower than for previous demonstrations against the country's COVID-19 policies. And the reading of this law has stoked serious debate in France between different political ideologies over citizens' freedoms, rights, and the legislation's constitutionality, hence why it has taken so long for it to reach a final vote. Not one, but 2 reviews are set to be done by France's constitutional review body before the end of this week. Ryan Thompson, CGTN, Paris.
Well, let's now go to Hannah Viviers for a look at the day's business news. Hannah.
Thank you, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Southern Africa region is set for an economic rebound this year after the COVID-induced downturn in 2020-2021. And Tanzania and Burundi sign an agreement to construct a $900 million railway line that will link the two countries.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Time now for a look at business right here on Africa Live. Southern Africa is set for an economic rebound. According to the African Development Bank's outlook, the region is forecast to have grown by 3.2% in 2021 and will grow by 2.4% this year. It's a solid bounce back from the 6.3% decline suffered in 2020, largely due to COVID. While the virus is still a threat, the severity of its spread and impact has lessened. Businesses in South Africa are feeling a lot more optimistic about an economic rebound. Small businesses say that they were particularly hard hit during the pandemic, with hundreds having to close. Some businesses, though, say that they weathered the storm and have come back stronger. Well, Tanzania and Burundi have signed an agreement to construct a $900 million railway line that will link the two countries. According to Tanzania's finance ministry, the two neighboring East African nations are searching for financial backers for the project. The 282-kilometer line is the latest step towards Tanzania's goal of building a 2,561-kilometer railway network in its bid to boost regional trade. It'll connect the western Tanzanian town of Uvinza with the Burundian capital of Gitega. Once completed, the rail network is expected to ferry more than 1 million tons of cargo between the two East African countries. Well, Africa's internet economy is transforming development on the continent by fostering economic opportunities and providing innovative solutions to complex challenges in key sectors. The E-Economy Africa 2020 report talks of the great potential of the continent's internet economy, the promising tech entrepreneurs driving innovation, as well as a growing tech talent across the continent. CGTN's Nick Mudima gives us the details.
The internet economy is expected to add up to $180 billion to Africa's gross domestic product by 2025, accounting for 5.2% of the continent's GDP, according to a report on e-economy issued by the International Financial Corporation in collaboration with Google. Now, by 2050, e-economy is projected to add up to $712 billion to Africa's GDP, representing 8.5% of its GDP, according to the report. Africa's GDP witnessed a growth of 4% per year between 2010 and 2019, more than twice of that European countries at 1.7% and Latin America also at 1.7% over the same period. Now, according to the report. Now, the report further says that the African internet economy is one of the largest overlooked investment opportunities of the past decade, with potential for profound impact on the continent's development. It also noted that despite the COVID-19 pandemic and its related harsh impacts on the global macroeconomy, including Africa, African e-economy is expected to be resilient as usage of digital connectivity and services have increased significantly during the crisis. The report expected e-commerce, e-logistics, education tech, fintech, entertainment and health tech to be the subsectors that will drive the resilience of Africa's e-economy. It's back to you.
Well, let's zone in on Ghana's economy now, which is reported to be inching closer to the pre-COVID levels after taking a hit from the coronavirus. The International Monetary Fund is forecasting that the West African country's economy will expand by 6.2% this year. But as Ghana's economy tries to rebound, traders say the high cost of goods and services is taking a toll on many businesses. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rafah reports from Accra.
The new year has started on a slow note for Rosina Edujemfi. She sells groceries at this market in Accra and says people are not coming to buy food.
Many people have used their money to celebrate Christmas, and because the groceries are now very expensive, consumers are not coming to the market.
Like Rosina, other traders in this market say business is off to a poor start.
Most of the things I sell here are imported. Since last year, the cedi has been depreciating against the US dollar, so it's now more expensive to import food products.
Despite these concerns, the government says Ghana's economy looks positive this year. The IMF has projected the economy to expand by 6.2%. Still, traders are concerned about the cost of goods and services shooting up this year. Last year, the hikes in fuel prices linked to changes in global markets fed through to inflation in other sectors of Ghana's economy. The cost of transporting food to the market went up, and traders had to pass the extra cost to consumers. Economists said as the global economy recovers from the pandemic, Ghana's economy is also likely to gain.
Once you hear commodity price going up, then you know that economies like Ghana, which is commodity driven, obviously we stand to gain because we deal in a lot of commodities like gold, like cocoa and all of that. So once the price of these products are going up in the global market, obviously you would expect that we're going to be earning some foreign exchange, and that in itself will increase or boost the growth that we expect to have.
Like many traders in this market, Rosina Edujemfi wants the projected economic growth to translate into the cost of goods and services going down. She believes it will help many businesses recover quickly from the shocks by the pandemic. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Well, let's bring it back to East Africa, where Uganda Airlines is moving to expand its cargo operations in a bid to become more competitive in the airline industry. The company is facing stiff competition from regional rivals, as well as the impact of ongoing COVID-19 restrictions. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Taking to the skies with a new strategy, Uganda Airlines believes expanding its cargo carrying capacity could help boost its income.
We want also to build our cargo operations so that we can leverage on these long-haul flights. If we can take our agricultural products to London, to China, to Guangzhou, to different corners of the world, so that our people can earn, so that we can get the revenue that we need, and then we can even grow our fleet. I think for right now, that is the immediate action that we are looking at.
The change in strategy follows stiff competition from rival airlines. Kenya Airways and South African Airways have signed a cooperation agreement in a bid to become more competitive.
The problem with Uganda is airlines that it is going to face is that you are competing with two companies which are private owned and which are, again, in terms of fleet, in terms of experience, in terms of also, because the private sector has come in, they are going to inject more resources. And in terms of airport capacity, these are very efficient companies in terms of those parameters.
But Uganda Airlines says it's focused on its plan to remain a key player in the business.
What we have to do is to just stick to our strategy. And that means that we embarked on establishing new routes, and that's where our energy will be focused. We'll focus on London, Mumbai, Guangzhou, and so many other, Middle East, our interlines coming up, our partnerships, strategic partnerships.
Uganda Airlines has recently faced travel restrictions to Dubai due to a surge in COVID-19 cases arriving from Entebbe. But the ban has since been lifted, and the airline is now making sure that all passengers take 2 mandatory COVID-19 tests prior to their travel.
The vigilance our team has to make sure that every passenger on board is negative. And when we're on board, we're also masking up, sanitizing, and we make sure that at least we deliver a passenger who's negative.
With the new adjustments, Uganda Airlines hopes to spread its wings to new destinations. The pandemic has had a devastating impact on airlines across the world, but the resumption of flights to the Middle East provides some good news for Uganda Airlines in what remains a difficult time for the industry. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Well, Nigerians are bemoaning the recent move by the government to tax non-alcoholic beverages. Authorities announced an excise levy of 10 naira or $0.02 on every liter of drink to shore up government's revenue. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam brings us that story.
An array of various brands of carbonated drinks in this store in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Coroni Fortune runs this decade-old business, which she has grown from a retail store to a wholesale outlet. She rakes in a profit of an average $1,000 monthly, but that's been threatened by government's new tax on products like hers.
The demand is high, very high. but recently it started dropping because of the increase in price.
And consumers may be seeking other alternatives.
People are suffering. People are going through a health. So government should not be talking about increasing VAT on drinks. You buy 2 Coke now, 500. You are looking at the cost of food.
I think we need to focus on having our own locally made drinks, what that can be made in communities, so that the transportation of those drinks from the brewery or from the warehouses can reduce.
Nigeria's soft drink market is estimated at $1.4 billion, growing from $713.6 million in 2016. That's according to global market research firm Euromonitor International. Economic watchers are worried that the government's levy on non-alcoholic beverages could impede the sector's gains and aggravate inflationary pressures.
This is a policy that ordinarily the government should have figured out. What are the implications? What are the gains on the part of government, on the part of Nigeria as a nation? Can we mitigate the job losses? Can we mitigate the revenue that will accrue to some of these companies? It's going to affect the value chain. It's going to affect that sector critically. It's going to lead to job losses. It's going to lead to unemployment, and it's really, going to affect, the overall economy of our nation.
Statistics from the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria shows that Nigeria's food and beverage sector contributes 38% of the total manufacturing sector to the GDP and generates more than 1.5 million jobs. Experts advise the government to weigh all options, including high inflation rate, before implementing the excise levy. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
That's all the business news I have for you for now, but I will be back at the top of the hour with Global Business. Let's take a look at what's going to be coming up at the top of the hour. Global leaders have convened for the week-long virtual World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The summit also brings together business leaders and civil society who will share their insights relating to the most urgent global issues such as climate change, social contracts, and vaccine equity. Join us as we explore this and much more at the top of the hour. But for now, let's take a look at what's coming up on Africa Live with Beatrice.
Hannah, thank you. Let's now take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Holders Algeria stunned by Equatorial Guinea as the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations enters the last round of the group stages.
Beijing, China's capital and its cultural nerve center. A modern metropolis with traditional roots. And now it becomes the first city in the world to host both Summer and Winter Olympics. After 14 years, the biggest sporting extravaganza returns to Beijing. Thousands of athletes from around the globe will compete in over 100 events at 3 zones. Cheered on by over 1.4 billion Chinese citizens and millions abroad. CGTN will bring you a ringside view of the historic event. 2022 Beijing Olympics, the games that matter on CGTN. See the difference.
Equatorial Guinea caused the greatest upset so far at this year's Africa Cup of Nations, defeating holders Algeria by 1-0. Esteban Obiang struck from a corner to end Algeria's run of 35 unbeaten internationals, inflicting the first defeat since October 2018. The shock Group E result leaves Algeria bottom of the standings and needing a win in their last group game against Cote d'Ivoire on Thursday to stand any chance of advancing. Equatorial Guinea now have 3 points, one behind the Ivorians on 4, with Sierra Leone on 2 and Algeria with 1.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate my players, the players of Guinea. Against Algeria, we noticed that in the first minutes we were not playing well. But the most important thing was to win the game, even if we did not play well. That's what we did. We didn't play well, but we won the game.
A good 3-year run has come to an end. With all due respect to Equatorial Guinea, this defeat really hurts.
Today, we may be in a difficult situation, but looking back at the last 3 years, we had an incredible run of invincibility. But now, we have to focus on the future. There's a qualification to fight for, so we must never give up. I know things won't be easy, but we will prepare well for the match against Côte d'Ivoire.
The other Group E match saw Sierra Leone score a dramatic injury time equalizer to grab a 2-2 draw against Côte d'Ivoire. Sierra Leone, who held a pre-tournament favourite Algeria in their opening match, twice came from behind against the Elephants. Côte d'Ivoire had been sailing through the match before a goal-keeping howler from Badra Sangare allowed Alhaji Kamara to tap in the leveller. Despite the disappointing result, Ivorian supporters in Abidjan have reiterated their confidence in the team.
I'm disappointed with the result, but happy with the overall performance. If the goalkeeper hadn't made the mistake, we could have won. These are mistakes that can happen to anyone, but he played a good game. I also think the coach should not have substituted Sebastian Haller and Wilfried Zaha, because we could have scored more with them on the pitch.
I think the Ivorians are quite formidable. Today, they produced a beautiful game compared to the first match. We were just unlucky with the incident at the end. We remain confident for the rest of the competition. Despite this draw, we are sure that we will qualify to the next round.
The world's toughest desert race came to an end on Friday after 9,000 kilometers of grueling racing through Saudi Arabia. The 2022 edition of the famous Dakar Rally saw Africa's top team, Toyota Gazoo Racing, claim the top spot on the coveted podium as Nasser Al Attiyah and Matthew Bommel clinched the title in Jeddah. CGTN CS Duplessis has more.
For many, the ultimate challenge in off-road racing is the Dakar. A daunting race through desert conditions which puts a driver's mental and physical toughness to the ultimate test, be it on a bike, in a truck, or behind the wheel of a vehicle modified to handle the rigors of the desert. It has a way of separating those who can from those who can't. And one man who certainly can is four-time winner Nasser Al Attiyah.
Yes, absolutely. There's a great feeling and great win, and thank for Toyota Gazoo Racing for all the support. Thank for technical manager, Mr. Glenn Hall, to build this amazing vehicle, T1 Plus. Yeah, it was amazing Dakar, Yeah, I'm really quite happy. Thank you so much.
Al Attiyah and Bommel led from start to finish in their Toyota Hilux DKR T1 Plus vehicle. But for former champion Janelle de Villiers, it wasn't smooth sailing, as a 5-minute and then a 5-hour time penalty for his second incident where he struck yet another motorcycle rider saw the 2009 winner ruled out of a spot on the podium. But de Villiers managed to claim a top 5 finish for the 14th time in his stellar career and finish his 19th consecutive Dakar without a retirement.
Obviously a little bit disappointed, wanted to be on the podium, but another Dakar on the books, and the car was really good. The guys did a great job. Thanks to all the team for all their hard work. And yes, happy to be here.
The exciting Henk Latergan, who only in his second Dakar showed signs that he was one to watch for the future with 2 impressive stage victories, was also reminded that it doesn't always go your way in the desert.
We've had the full Dakar experience. We've had from the highest highs and winning a stage early on, and then the lowest lows, sitting until after dark in the desert, sitting there for 3 days. So it's been a real Dakar experience. We've had the full go at it.
It is the second Dakar title for the Johannesburg-based Toyota Gazoo racing team, who has shown in the space of 10 years that they have been in production, that they possess the talent and technology behind the wheel and in the workshop to take on the best no matter the conditions. The planning for the next Dakar has already begun, and you can expect Africa's top team to once again be in the mix for the title when the race begins in January of 2023. CS Duplessis, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.